Good morning. Welcome to Real Estate Radio Denver. This is the most important hour of radio of the weekend, and we're here every Saturday right here on News Talk 710 KNUS from 9 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Tom Souther. Thank you so much for joining me. And as you know, Real Estate Radio Denver is a show dedicated to building Denver's housing market. We're here to give you some great advice, help you connect with some true experts in the marketplace, and that's whether you're buying a home, selling a home, refinancing, or maybe you're dealing with a credit issue. And we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about debt resolution, so hang in there. Now, remember, you can always give us a call off-air. Our off-air number is 720-515-1818. Again, 720-515-1818. And we would love to put you together with that right professional. So again, within every market, there's some great solutions and just tremendous opportunities right now. You need some trusted advice, and that's what you're going to hear every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. right here on News Talk 710 KNUS. So today, we're going to spend some time and we're going to help with debt resolution. I've got three fantastic guests. I have with me a good friend of mine and business partner who is a real estate agent with
Cherry Creek Properties.
I hate when I have little brain meltdowns. Cherry Creek Properties. I have Vivi Gloriod with me. Vivi's been in the biz for a long time. She's an expert. She owns investment properties. She will find you that perfect place for you, whether it's your home, whether it's something for you to make a little extra money. You name it, she can get that done for you. Vivi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
All right. And then I also have with me two attorneys today that we're going to have a really good conversation about debt resolution and how to help you there. I have with me from Colorado Legal Associates, I have Bill Myers. Bill, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And I have Andrew Stein as well.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. And do you guys want to throw in a little bit about Colorado Legal Associates, what all you guys do, where you're located, what's going on with your firm?
Colorado Legal Associates is a small firm that specializes in debt relief and bankruptcy, and it's located on Wadsworth Boulevard between Jewel and 285 at 2109 South Wadsworth Boulevard, Suite 203 in Lakewood.
So centrally located, and you guys are working the entire Colorado marketplace, I'm assuming, centralized in Denver and in that marketplace.
Yeah, Denver and the metropolitan area, and anyone's welcome to give us a call, and we can try to help them out no matter where they are in the state of Colorado.
Perfect. Let's throw out your phone number, too, as well.
720-974-9790.
And do we want to put out a web address or a... I've stumped them. Sorry about that. It is www.CLA Colorado Law. So you can find those guys there, Colorado Legal Associates. And let's just get started. I'm going to hand some of this off to Vivi. And we're going to, I think the first thing that I'd love to just throw out there, everybody is a little scared of that bankruptcy word. And, I'd love to, and they shouldn't be, because it's an answer. It's a fix it as much as an end. It's a beginning as much as an end. And I'd love to have you guys just talk on that point for a minute, and we can get into what some of the great advantages are that people experience when they go through that process, and maybe we can head towards how do you come to that decision if you really pull that trigger.
Well, I think how you know that a bankruptcy might be a good alternative to look at is you need to take an honest assessment of what your situation is with respect to what your current income situation is, what your current outgo or expenditures situation are, and whether or not you're making headway on a monthly basis of staying even with your bills, or whether you're sinking lower and lower into a situation where you feel like you're way over your head.
And I want to point out, Tom, to your point that there's a negative connotation and people are fearful of the term and the word, that it's really, first of all, it's been an awful economy over the last however many years, as we all know. And we have so many people who come into the office with situations that simply weren't their fault, whether it's medical bills or student loans, and a combination of that with the bad economy has really made this process an incredibly helpful way to get a fresh start. And although I understand that people are skeptical of bankruptcies or not paying back their debts, it's just you got to put your family and yourself first and realize that this is an incredible process to get a fresh start, and then try to avoid having it happen again.
Well, and that's the point that I think is so critical in this message, is that it's a start. It's a fresh start. And there is recovery. And I help so many people in my mortgage practice that have gone through this process with you or whoever, and they are restarted. And their credit recovers and all of those things happen. So it doesn't need to have that negative connotation. I just think that's what's out there in the marketplace. And I think if we address that and push it aside, then we can get on with what the reality of it is.
Yeah, I agree, Tom.
Great.
I wanted to ask, at what point do you know that bankruptcy would be a good alternative?
I think you'd have to kind of go back to your own particular budget situation first, and how far are you running in the red kind of each month, and how long have you let it persist? Oftentimes we have people come to bankruptcy and they've been so ashamed of their particular financial situation that they're really filing bankruptcy 6 to 9 months after really when it would have been in their best interest. Yeah, they've fallen behind on their credit card bills, and they say, well, I've got a little bit of a 401k here. Right. Why don't I go ahead and cash that out? That's absolutely the wrong answer. None of those creditors are going to be at your door helping you out in retirement.
Right.
Bill, let's go there right after the break, because I think that's a great point on how much assets and whatnot you're going to get rid of. But I want to let you know, you're listening to Real Estate Radio Denver here on News Talk 710 KNUS. I have Bill Myers and Andrew Stein from Colorado Legal Associates, and we're talking about debt relief. And I have with us Vivi Gloriod from Cherry Creek Properties. We're going to be right back answering questions for you. Come on back. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. I'm your host, Tom Souther, and I have in studio with me some just really great experts on debt resolution. How can we help you if you're in a situation that you feel like you're being overrun? It's very uncomfortable, and we really would like to get out the proper information. That's what this show is all about. It's about the truth, so that you can make an educated decision, get the help you need, get your questions answered before it's too late. So let me reintroduce my guests. I have with me from Colorado Legal Associates, I have Bill Myers. Bill, welcome back.
Thank you.
And I have Andrew Stein.
Thank you.
With us, and also Vivi Gloriod from Cherry Creek Properties. And we were talking, Bill Myers, about people going through this process and depleting their assets and maybe waiting. You mentioned waiting 6 to 9 months too long in that process before they make a call to your office and ask that question, what do I do? So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think if we can help someone with maybe saving their 401k, that would make my day.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of people are under a misconception that when they file bankruptcy, they have to surrender all their property. And so they go through this process of being further and further in the hole and struggling and hanging on to the last piece of wood as they're drowning in this debt, when they should realize that there's certain things that the law protects as assets. A person's entitled to, for example, $5,000 worth of equity in a motor vehicle, $10,000 worth of motor equity if the person's disabled. A homestead exemption that in this state is $60,000 for non-disabled individuals and $90,000 for the disabled or older individual, along with household goods and other miscellaneous items. You're not walking out as in 1978 pre-bankruptcy law, with a barrel around your belt and being embarrassed.
Yeah, but you can make a great living at that at Bronco games.
I think the barrel man proved that.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress. So they aren't walking away penniless. That's good. And so if you had to give someone some advice, when should they call you?
I think when they feel like they have really reached the end of their ropes and they're contemplating that initial withdrawal from their retirement fund in order to meet current expenses. That is one very significant danger sign.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting more calls from creditors and more harassing phone calls and messages from them than you are from your friends or family, I've often heard it said, then it's probably time to talk to a bankruptcy attorney. I mean, when the minimum payments on your credit cards are simply more than you can afford, it's probably time to come talk to a bankruptcy attorney. And like Bill was saying, you really don't want to spend an asset and have it be gone when it very well might be one of the assets that we can protect in a bankruptcy. Everyone, like Bill was saying, thinks that they might, not everyone, but there's people who believe they might have to give up their car, they might have to give up their house, and it's simply not the case. The vast majority of the time, we can protect those assets, or we can help you figure out a way to keep them through the bankruptcy when you might not be able to if you don't file bankruptcy.
You know, it's interesting. I'm helping a woman right now going through bankruptcy, and she unfortunately had refied her house so many times during when the market was good before we hit the recession. And so she's living in a home that's worth about $120,000. Her mortgage is $250,000. She's disabled. She's getting $1,800 a month on Social Security, and her mortgage payment $1,600 a month.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, and it's sad because she would like to keep her home. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, you can't live off of $200 a month. I mean, really, after you pay your utility bill and, your phone and, how do you eat? And so she's going through the bankruptcy, and she was considering putting the house in bankruptcy. And we looked at the two different ways that would affect her as well, because you can just wrap it up in your bankruptcy, or you can choose to short sale your house, which is what she chose to do. We're short selling it. And what's going to happen is in 2 years, as long as she keeps her nose clean, keeps her credit up, she'll be able to buy another house, where with the bankruptcy, she's going to be 3 years out. So it is. It's just one of those things. And I think a lot of people are in trouble with the real estate aspect, because a lot of people refied for a lot more than the house was worth. And now they're sitting with huge mortgage payments that they can't afford.
Well, as a mortgage guy, I mean, I saw a lot of those. They were doing 125% of value refinances, and you forget it. You just can't. You don't make that up. Particularly what's happened over the last 5 or 6 years.
And in addition to the short sale sort of avenue that Vivi has talked about, there are other options within the bankruptcy code that you can, if you have mortgages that are more than 100% of the value of the house, within the context of a Chapter 13, there may be ways that you can go ahead and get rid of the second or third mortgage that you've taken out and get down to just to get you down
base. Into a payment that you can live with and afford,
so that you can only have to pay the first mortgage.
And that's called stripping. Is that right?
That's the normal term for it. Technically,
you
it's
strip away the second and
Rule
third
506 motion that you file with the court.
Okay.
So again, the moral of the story is if you're having this kind of trouble, there's options. There's so many different ways to go here that you really need that professional help. You need to talk to somebody who knows the ins and outs, and that's what we encourage you to do, and that's what this show is all about. So again, I want to throw out the phone number, 720-515-1818. We would love to help you if you're struggling a little bit, or even not, just want to get some information. Again, call 720-515-1818. That's my off-air number, and I'd love to put you together with Bill Myers with Colorado Legal Associates and find out if this is an option, or if it's not. This bankruptcy is not the answer for everyone, but the information is critical. So, again, 720-515-1818, and let's put you together with the right person. So, so that's an interesting piece. You can potentially eliminate a second mortgage or a third. I see layers and layers sometimes with customers.
Bill, I had a question for you. Let's say somebody has a whole bunch of credit card debt and other debt, but they have a home that they have $150,000 worth of equity in. What would bankruptcy do to them at that point?
That's a much tougher question, depending upon what the state of the collection efforts are on the credit card debt. A person's normally entitled to a $60,000 exemption.
Okay.
For the older individual, we're talking 60-plus years of age, there's a $90,000 exemption. So in that situation, there's more equity available than what the mortgage is. Mm-hmm. But you may be able to structure something within a 13 such that you can take care of a portion, if not all, of the credit card debt and still maintain your residence, depending upon what your income and other things. And that's the reason why you need to have an attorney to actually go over what your budget and so forth are and discuss and get sound advice. You can't really answer these questions too much in the abstract.
Right. And it's interesting. I've been getting the PACER documents, and I've noticed that 12% of the people in Colorado are trying to do bankruptcy by themselves, going in and filing by themselves. And so I think there's a big fear out there that it's just going to be so expensive to hire a lawyer. How does that work with the fees and the costs?
Well, we charge a flat rate that you're allowed. You put some money down, and then you have up to a year to go ahead and pay our fee in full. And then, certainly we evaluate whether or not you're suitable for a bankruptcy, either Chapter 7, which is a straight discharge of your debts, or Chapter 13, where you make payments to the court, and the court to the trustee, and then the trustee distributes a certain portion of those monies to the respective creditors.
Does Chapter 13s, do they go for a certain amount of time? Like you would have payments for 2 years or 3 years, or does it depend?
Generally, there's a minimum of 36 months, depending on what the debt structure is, and up to a maximum period of 60 months. There are some income caps. There are some, you can't have more than $300,000 something worth of unsecured debt. So there are certain limitations, and those are the things that you really need to talk to. That's not something we're going to go into dollar for dollar on a radio show.
Right. And unsecured debts, you're talking about credit cards, essentially.
Credit cards, medical bills is a big portion.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that is a big driver in many people's decision. They have these life events. They have a divorce. They have
a death, loss of income,
a loss of job. So many families are two-income families, and they're living right up to that level, and a spouse loses that income, which sends them into a spiral with collections. Or you have some medical issue that generates a huge debt, and all of those are in that.
It's also incredible because when that's happening, it's going to continue to spiral downward. The interest rates go up, and that, Bill was just talking about the difference between a 7 and a 13, but both of them usually have an extremely positive effect on one's credit. So when you're starting to miss those payments and when your credit is starting to get negatively affected, that's another real good reason to talk to a bankruptcy attorney, because of how quickly there might be a real positive effect on your credit, and people don't know that.
And I would like to spend the next segment talking about that credit rebuild and how that goes.
Let me just make one quick comment, because there's an area of the law in the context of uninsured medical expenses that a couple of years ago the legislature enacted a bill that specifically requires hospitals to allow people to have the lowest possible rate, and when they get out of the hospital, they are entitled to enter into a payment plan with the hospital the person has to default on that payment plan before the hospital can take them to court. And that's a fairly significant sort of thing, at least with respect to hospital bills. It doesn't cover you for doctor bills or whatever, but you can actually negotiate some of these things within the context of planning. Then if ultimately you have to file bankruptcy, at least you haven't been harassed on the hospital end.
Well, and that's something that I'd like to throw in there as well. If you talk about, are you getting more calls from creditors than friends? What happens to those calls if they do pull the trigger on a bankruptcy? Those creditor calls.
Well, you're prohibited from taking those kinds of harassing calls. It's ultimately you can be held, the creditor doing that can be held in contempt by the bankruptcy court.
So at notification that you're in a bankruptcy, those calls should stop.
They should stop.
So that's a little stress off of somebody's head.
It's a lot of the reasons why people come into the office is because of all of those calls and all of the eventual lawsuits and garnishments and everything that all of those adverse effects of creditors coming after you, they all stop. I mean, almost everything stops upon filing a bankruptcy.
Awesome. Well, I want to come back after the break and talk about how that credit rebuild works a little bit and what options you have. You're listening to Real Estate Radio Denver here on News Talk 710 KNUS, and I want you to come back because this is important to know what that credit rebuild looks like. Come on back. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. I'm your host, Tom Souther, and we are here every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. on News Talk 710 KNUS, and we are talking about debt resolution today, and I have some great guests with me. I have two attorneys from Colorado Legal Associates. I have Bill Myers. Bill, welcome back.
Thank you.
And I have Andrew Stein as well. Andrew.
Hey, thanks, Tom.
Both you guys, attorneys, you both focus, Bill more than Andrew, I believe, in the bankruptcy day-to-day world. And again, your offices are out in Lakewood, off of Wadsworth, and you both are a wealth of information on this topic. We were talking about, let me throw in my third guest, I apologize, Vivi Gloriod with Cherry Creek Properties. Vivi, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
And we wanted to go back, I think, to kind of the process and how long does this take and how fast do people get relief from the phone calls, and let's just do a short summary on what's the typical guy take. And I know that there's going to be very complex cases that take much longer, but Bill Myers, what's that time frame look like?
Well, once you file a bankruptcy, the calls for any harassing creditors or whatever should stop immediately. You have to appear before the trustee and answer questions under oath concerning your assets and obligations at a meeting of creditors. That's about 30 days from the date that you file.
How stressful is that for your customers? I'm assuming it
varies.
That's you mostly,
right? We go through most of the anticipated questions ahead of time, and then we go through just before the meeting. We go through additional questions. They get a chance to see what other people are there, and they realize it's not nearly as scary as they think. And then about 2 months after that, if there's no outstanding objections in a Chapter 7, the person's granted a discharge, which is essentially wiping clean all of the dischargeable debts on the bankruptcy. And that's what most people are concerned with. Obviously, there's some debts that are not going to be dischargeable, and that's something that I don't think we have enough time to talk to about this morning. But sure, most of your run-of-the-mill credit card debts and medical bills and so forth, those are erased in the discharge.
And obviously, everybody's case is a little bit different, so we've got to allow for more complexity, less complexity, et cetera.
Absolutely. That's why you come to an attorney for professional advice.
Right.
And Bill just mentioned the timeline, but to add those numbers up for any listeners, it's really about 4 months or a little bit less than 4 months from the time you file. A Chapter 7 really isn't an overly complicated situation, and the attorneys can get it done in about 3 to 4 months, although we don't encourage people to try this by themselves. I couldn't believe the number that Vivi mentioned mentioned that 12% of filers have tried to do that on their own. We see how often that leads to problems and complications, and we really encourage you to talk to us or another attorney. Bill had also mentioned how immediately, he said that the calls stop, but that's also any garnishments that might be in place, any correspondences from creditors. And I think Bill's right, there might not be time to talk about the list of dischargeable debts, but I think most of the listeners know that a lot of the taxes and student loans would be the few things that we cannot get rid of, although we can get rid of some of them.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, the student loan exemption, that also hits you pretty hard in getting back into the mortgage world if you've got student loans in that process.
But there are new programs within the for people with student loans. The income-based repayment program is one really good one. That's available to people who are not in default on their student loans, and that allows them to pay really based on what their income is over and above an initial living allowance.
Yeah, and I see that every day in my mortgage practice. A lot of people with a fairly large student loan debt, and the payments are very affordable. So those I think you can work with a lot more easily on your own than some of the other debt. So since I threw out that M word for mortgage, maybe we should talk about that for a minute and see what some of the recovery time is.
Right. I get people all the time calling me. We just had that one gal, she had called and she had been through a bankruptcy and was ready to buy. And you said she had 8 more months. So what was the timeline on that?
Oh, gosh, I got to remember that deal specifically. But I believe she had done a Chapter 7 with a foreclosure in that deal. So she would be 36 months. And now that can be a little bit complicated. I want to tell people it's 36 months, but sometimes it's not from discharge. Sometimes it's if there's a property that was actually the keys were handed back and it was given back to the bank, it's when the bank issued or there was a trustee's deed issued on that property. So sometimes it's a little longer than 3 years from pure discharge. And you attorneys jump in on this if you want to. But it's a ballpark of 3 years.
Yeah, we've had a client that had otherwise no complications and was eligible for an FHA loan within 2 years of the date of discharge.
Yeah, and if there's no foreclosure, no property involved in that bankruptcy, then we are 24 months on an FHA financing from discharge date. And usually there's a little fudge on the exact month. Maybe it's the end of the month and the discharge date, but we get pretty close. So that's 24 months. That's not long.
That really isn't.
And if you're in, you guys talked about a Chapter 13 where you restructure, correct? They get into a payment plan?
Correct.
And that one, we can be as little as 12 months into that plan with approval by the trustee, by the court, right?
Yeah, you have to have the trustee's permission to incur new debt.
Yeah.
And the trustee will routinely grant that permission as long as it's reasonable. And it makes sense.
Yeah, and I've done a number of those, and I've never seen one turned down that was reasonable. You're looking at a situation today, Vivi, you can certainly speak on this, where your mortgage payment is typically less than a rental payment.
Oh, absolutely.
So the court is anxious for that to happen.
We close Kevin tomorrow, who's been living in a 600 square foot apartment for the last 2 years, and he is buying 2,700 square feet of a newer home right in the middle of Denver for $240,000, and his payment's going to be right around $1,000 a month.
Perhaps less than what he was paying on the apartment.
Right.
Yeah, and after tax, certainly.
And what's really fun is we did walk through this morning, and he said, I already have 2 of my buddies, and they're moving into the basement because there's a mother-in-law suite, and they're going to be I'm actually going to be making money by moving into this house.
Nice.
So he's thrilled. He's not going to have a mortgage. I mean, he has his mortgage payment that his buddies are going to be paying for, and he's, life is looking good for him. So
yeah, and that's the reality. And I've again yet to see the court say no, we're not going to approve one that's reasonable. So that credit issue is it's a reset button, and I want to just comment a little bit. I know the attorneys on air here are a little reluctant to give any specific credit advice, but we see a pretty fast increase in scores and recovery after bankruptcy. It is literally intended to be a reset button.
Yeah, and I can tell you that I have a software program that will predict or give its best guess at what the credit score will be a year after this discharge that we keep talking about.
Sure.
So in a Chapter 7, we're talking about a year and 4 or 5 months right from filing, so a year and a half, less than that. And many of the cases I see, and like you said, we are reluctant because this isn't always
not an exact
perfect,
science.
right?
That's right.
But I've seen increases to people's credit scores routinely of 50, 70, over 100 points, and that's in less than a year and a half. And that's also when the alternative is not being able to make those minimum monthly payments.
Right, and then your credit score is really spiraling down.
It's really a fresh start and a reset.
Yeah. So let's come back after break and let's talk about what you tell your customers or advice, and how do you actively rebuild that credit once they're done to maximize your ability to buy 12 months or 2 years or 3 years later, whatever that process is, because I think we can give some good advice on how that works. You're listening to Real Estate Radio Denver here on News Talk 710 KNUS. I want to encourage you again to make that phone call. Leave us a message at 720-515-1818. 720-515-1818. I'd love to put you together with Bill Myers or Andrew Stein and get you that information that you need. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Denver. I'm your host, Tom Souther. We're talking about debt resolution today, and we're having a great conversation. I think there's some good information here, and we want to just take some of that mystery away and some of the terror, if nothing else, the fear that people have, that you have about getting some help or getting your questions answered if you're in a debt problem, and give you an idea of what those starting points are, and just let you have some educated some knowledge here about when do you start that process and how that all works. So I've got some great experts with me. I've got Bill Myers and Andrew Stein with Colorado Legal Associates, and I have Vivi Gloriod. Here I go. Your name is now Cherry Creek. I have Vivi Gloriod.
That would be terrible.
It would be terrible.
I know. I love my name.
I love your name too. I have Vivi Gloriod with Cherry Creek Properties, and we left last segment about how that bankruptcy hits your credit, and talked a little bit about the reset. And I'd like to go back there because I see this every day in my mortgage practice where people don't rebuild their credit. They go through the bankruptcy and they're scared of the credit. And that is absolutely the wrong path, wouldn't you think, Bill and Andrew, that they really need to get out there and establish something new?
I would agree. The one of the worst things you can do is just be totally afraid of credit, such that you never go ahead and get any sort of credit card or any other loan in the future, because your credit score will end up stagnating at the level that it had at just before the bankruptcy. One of the ways that we suggest people do this, they're going to be getting many offers from car dealerships, right after they file. They'll get 3-4 car dealerships having them buy a new car because the car dealer is protected. They're a secured debt. It's after the bankruptcy's been filed. Unless you need a car, you shouldn't go out and get one. But getting a car payment, that's going to be something that's going to be regularly reported. A prepaid credit card is another potential option. The key is to make sure that you've got a budget and you're making your payments on time. That's how you end up rebuilding your credit history.
Well, Bill, I tell many of my customers, go get those credit cards, get a couple. From the mortgage side, I really would like to see people have 3 trade lines, 3 lines of credit on their credit report after a bankruptcy or some other credit event. So get those, put them in a drawer. If need be. What people, I don't think, realize is that credit report is literally a stamp in time. It doesn't necessarily tell you what their balances were last month or 2 months ago or 6 months from now. 6 months ago. It just knows that you owe $500 on that $1,000 limit this month. So put it in a drawer. Nobody cares if you used it forever, or better yet, charge a lunch or a $20 bill once a month and pay it off.
And pay it off on time.
On time.
Pay your bill.
Or, you can also put your cell phone bill. If you're going to, everybody has a cell phone.
Sure.
You're going to have the bill come to you. Put it on your credit card opposed to just writing the check. It's really going to make a big difference on your credit.
Put it on your credit card and then
pay off the credit card.
Well, put it on a credit card that gives you airline miles.
Exactly, or
fly
points.
around with Alec Baldwin.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. So the moral of that story is that the advice I give my mortgage customers is pay your bills on time, get some credit lines, and you'll be okay. Get 2 or 3 in 6 months and 12 months. That score is going to increase amazingly.
And that's particularly true with a person with a steady job.
Yes.
I mean, if you're a situation where you're bankrupt and you have no job at the time, and that's really what's caused for the bankruptcy, the first thing you need to go ahead and do is stabilize your income flow so that you have a job that you can end up rebuilding your credit.
Well, tell us the story you told us on the break about this client with a steady income.
Well, we had a client that with a steady income or many years ago filed a bankruptcy and then was so afraid of getting any kind of credit that they didn't get credit other than their mortgage, and their mortgage wasn't really reporting this sort of thing. And they went later on, 5 years after the bankruptcy, went to refinance, and their credit score was so low because they were afraid of that they didn't end up qualifying for the FHA loan to go ahead and refinance, which would have ended up with a much lower payment than they had with the pre-existing mortgage.
So you can't stick your head in the sand.
Right.
Get some additional credit. Get some new credit post-bankruptcy, and you will be fine. Don't be afraid of it. You have to get back in the game.
Right. I'm thankful that we do have the homestead. My neighbors went through bankruptcy, and they did it incorrectly. They didn't go to a lawyer soon enough. They got rid of most of their 401k trying to pay the bills, and finally when they realized they just couldn't keep up, they filed bankruptcy. And now we're actually going to sell their house, and we're going to put them in a senior living. We're going to go put them over in Windsor Gardens where they can pay cash and they're not going to have a mortgage payment. But it is nice because they're living in this house, and that house is the only thing they have left because they didn't go to a lawyer soon enough, and they lost all of their retirement trying to keep up on all their bills. And so the Homestead Act is a positive thing where people are able to hold on to their homes even if they go through bankruptcy.
Well, and I totally understand there's an honor thing here, and that most people think, I can just pull myself out if I can just make another month.
I promise to make the payments.
Right. And, get some help before you're at the point where all of everything is depleted. And, my advice here is call Colorado Legal Associates. Where can they reach you?
They can reach us at 720-974-9790. And you can certainly leave a message, and we'll get back with you within a reasonable time.
And Bill, how much does it cost? Let's say, not everybody who's listening has so many issues that they do need to go through bankruptcy, but maybe somebody just needs to come in and talk to you and see if that's the right idea for them.
Well, we allow people to come in once they've discussed their situation and bankruptcy is a viable option to make a down payment of $100 and then make payments over a period of time.
Bill, it might be important to mention that we do free consultations. I think that's very important to the listeners. You're welcome to give us a call, and someone will meet with you and do a free consultation to give you the best advice we can on what direction is right for you.
Absolutely. I thought I'd made that clear that it was a free consultation, but thanks for clarifying that, Andy. And then you make payments, and we can give you the specifics of the amount. We'll do that during the initial consultation to let you know what the fees are.
But it sounds pretty affordable.
Well, it's the fact that you can make payments. We're certainly within the regular market rate for other attorneys for the amount of time in that is involved.
And then we talked a little bit about this as far as types of assets that are protected from a bankruptcy. And you said vehicles, $5,000 in equity, and then retirement accounts are not included in bankruptcy? Or
you'd need to report them as an asset in bankruptcy, but they're also exempt.
They're protected. The creditors can't. You don't have to turn over a qualified retirement account. After the bankruptcy, you still have it.
And that can be a 403B government one. It can be a
401k.
401k. It can be a retirement plan. It can be.
How about Roth?
Roth are included.
Okay.
All of your general retirement assets, no matter what the specific numeric designation is under the tax
as a woman,
code.
I would have to ask, what about jewelry?
I thought you were going to say shoes.
We can talk about that in a second.
Shoes,
You get
jewelry, they're all good.
Thousands of dollars in protections on your personal property. Jewelry's even separate. Your clothing, your like we've said, automobile, home. There really are quite a few protections. I mean, it's a reasonable process. You don't get protection if you have an extra Porsche that's free and clear in the garage, or if you have 6 fancy motorcycles. So it's a reasonable process, and you get thousands of dollars in protection on your personal property, your clothing, your automobile, the $60,000 that Bill has mentioned several times against your home. And just to also be clear, because the term equity can be a little bit confusing. If your car is worth $10,000 and you owe $5,000, that's what we're talking about when we're saying $5,000 in equity. The difference between.
So you don't have to be driving around a junker that's worth $4,999.
Right.
Got it.
And it doesn't mean you can't keep the automobile if it is worth more than $5,000. We just have to talk to you about what steps we need to take to protect it.
Which is why people need to call.
Lots of options.
Yes, and lawyers. I mean, I actually talk to these people, the people who are trying to file by themselves, and my big thing to them is, this is not the way to do it. You need to get a lawyer to help you.
I couldn't imagine doing it before I was an attorney.
Even as an attorney with 30 plus years of bankruptcy experience, I wouldn't file my own bankruptcy on a bet.
Right.
I mean, you need that professional assistance compared to people that are going to process it privately to give you that independent advice and look at things, because you're too emotionally involved when you start to do it yourself that you're going to end up messing it up.
Right.
And particularly if there's a property involved in that transaction.
Correct.
Don't even think about it. You're listening to Real Estate Radio Denver here on News Talk 710 KNUS. And again, I have with me Colorado Legal Associates, 2 attorneys from their office, Bill Myers and Andrew Stein, and also Vivi Gloriod from Cherry Creek Properties. And we've got a little bit of time left, so let's kind of wrap up, and maybe we can summarize.
Sure.
We talked about 2 different formats of bankruptcy. Maybe we can hit those again. And just give those basics because we have both.
I'll take a swing at that. There really are 2 consumer bankruptcies, two viable options, and one is the Chapter 7, and it's a relatively quick and easy process for attorneys to help you get your debts discharged, the dischargeable ones, in about 3 to 4 months, and really help with the restart or the fresh start. And then most of the time for people making, a lot of money, you might be required to do a Chapter 13. And the Chapter 13 is the longer, more involved process with the court where you have a payment plan for 3 to 5 years. And just because it's 3 to 5 years and you are involved with the court doesn't mean it might not be incredibly financially beneficial to you.
Right.
But it does mean you need to talk to an attorney and figure out what's right for you and if it's appropriate.
And again, if you had a piece of advice to give to someone out there who's stressing over the calls that are coming in, when do they call you?
As soon as those calls are happening.
As soon as they start.
Yeah.
Get those options. All right. Fantastic.
Well, I mean, I think it's important as they're stressing out, and that is to take some time for themselves, turn the phone off, and actually collect all of what their particular assets and their debt situation is. We want to have a pretty good handle on what those debts are to give them good, sound advice.
Great. Bill Myers, thank you so much. Andrew Stein from Colorado Legal Associates and Vivi Gloriod from Cherry Creek Properties. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.